Muted.
Okay, and good morning, everybody. This is Stephen Bolden from 12-3 Marketing. Thank you again for joining for another weekly ACT webinar on our virtual user groups. Today's topic is going to be about ACT backups and database maintenance, something that is imperative that everybody should set up, something that a lot of people don't think about until it's too late. So to get started, let's explain a little bit about how your ACT database files work. This is something that's usually worth checking out on the server, but you can also set this on any local computer. I usually recommend that ACT database backups are always being run from the server. But if you go and check out in your My Documents folder, you'll see ACT, ACT Data, Databases. This is the default path for new ACT databases. You could have your ACT database stored anywhere on your computer or on the server, but that is where it goes by default most commonly, in your documents, ACT data, databases. And within inside, we'll see all sorts of database files and supplemental files folders. And if I dig in here, you'll see things like all of your ACT database attachments, your layouts, your templates, your reports. And so many people with good intentions will think that all they need to do is copy these files, copy and paste them, and move them onto a flash drive, and that they're good to go. And unfortunately, that is wrong. Or they'll think that a service like Carbonite or another Acronis backup utility that might be capturing all these files would be capturing it, but that's not the case. Because what's actually going on is that ACT relies on a database framework called SQL. SQL is it's a technical server made by Microsoft that stores all of your ACT data within tables and rows, kind of like a big Excel spreadsheet, and ACT is more or less the interface for accessing that data. And if you were to just copy these folders here, you wouldn't get the full picture of that whole SQL overview. So in order to actually get a full and complete ACT backup, I'll show you by making a manual backup first. And it's very easy to do. I have my ACT demo database open here. And if I go to File, Backup, Database. For those of you taking notes, that's a real handy one to know. File, Backup, Database. A window appears that asks me where do I want to save this to. I can browse to a new location. The default location of where they go, the backup files, where the program will select for you, is within, again, your documents, ACT data, but instead of databases, there's a backup folder here. And that's the default location that your ACT will back it up to. But you can send it to anywhere if you want to put it onto a separate external drive or any folder on your computer that you'd like. So if I choose File Backup, I choose my location of where I want the database backup to go. I always include attachments as well. You can password protect the backup file if you'd like. I usually advise against it just because if you ever need the backup, you may find yourself forgetting the password, but assume that you're responsible at writing them down, then you can password protect it if you like. When we press OK, the backup window appears. Usually it goes very quickly. Depends how many attachments you have in the database is normally the biggest factor. But that'll usually finish in less than a minute. And we got a success message. And if I go back to my ACT documents, ACT data, backup, I now have this zip file. And this zip archive is everything I need to completely and fully restore the database to an exact snapshot as it appears now. It'll have all the SQL tables, it'll have your custom layouts, your contacts, all the notes and histories. It's a virtual identical clone. These zip files, now I can copy this, paste it, move it onto different flash drives, sprinkle it around to all my different offsite utilities, and keep it safe. This is actually also the preferred method of if you ever want to move ACT to an entirely different computer. You can make an ACT backup file. It has everything you need in there to restore it, then you take the backup file and move it to the new computer, and then you can unpack it and restore from a backup, and you'll have an exact copy made. So that's all well and good for manually making the backups, but now we don't want to have to do that every day because, well, we don't want to have to do that every day. So we can automate it. And to do that, ACT has a built-in tool called the ACT Scheduler. And if you're one of my customers, then I have probably set this up on your main database computer already, but it doesn't always hurt to check it out anyway and learn for yourself. If you go under Tools, ACT Scheduler right here. I already have it open. It's this window here appears. And the ACT Scheduler is a utility. It's set to start up with your computer. It runs in the background down in the system tray here. And it can automatically run backup and maintenance tasks for you. So if I want to create a new task to back up my database automatically, I go in my ACT Scheduler and say create a task. It says first choose the database for which you would like to schedule a task. I will browse. I'll choose this demo database. You need to enter your ACT username and password so that the utility can log into the database. Press next. It says, what do you want to do? What is the ACT Scheduler doing here? Well, it can do database maintenance and backup, and we'll get to maintenance in just a minute. So we're going to choose backup out of this list. And it gives me a description. Back up your database on a regular schedule. You will provide a default location and default name. Very good. Go on next. It's thinking for a second here as it logs into the database. There we go. It says how many of the last backups do you want to keep? And now this is a really good feature of the program, is that I can specify any number and it always keeps the backups on a rolling basis. So if I'm going to be setting this to run every night, I can say keep the last 14, for example. And now it'll automatically back up every day and delete the oldest one. And I'll always have 2 weeks of backups on hand. I always recommend to keep a few days worth of backups, usually at least a week, because sometimes if somebody deletes 100 contacts, it might go a few days unnoticed. And if you're backing up too often, then you might actually lose the backups where they were still in there. So set yourself to many backup files. And then it says set a schedule. I always find daily is probably the best. I say you can choose hourly, weekly, monthly. Let's do it every day. And we'll have, depending on what computer you're working on, we can have this go 9:36 p.m. at night. That's pretty good. If this were your server, I usually will have those run, off business hours, of course, 11 p.m. or so when everybody's out of the office, hopefully. So go on. And the next step, this is an optional step for an email address. You can have an email address notified every time the backup finishes or every time this task completes. So for example, if I wanted to send an email alert to backup@12.3.com every time the backup finishes, then I could use this email notifications to do that. I cannot do this from this PC because I do not have the web version of ACT installed. The web version of ACT is one that goes on servers, and so if you try this from your server, you may have the option to send these test emails. Because this is a client workstation, it doesn't have the mail server settings inside of ACT built in that would be able to send this. But that's okay, because I'm not going to do it anyway. If you do send those email notifications, they do come through every time it's completed, then it's usually a good idea to create some type of Outlook rule or filter that will automatically file those away somewhere so that they don't get too annoying. If the backup does fail, it's handy because then you do get an alert that would come through and hopefully get triggered by one of your rules that says the backup failed for whatever reason. And so we finish, and here it is. I can see the tasks that I have in the menu. I have my ACT 2016 demo database. It is set to backup every night. I may actually have double skipped a step here. Yeah, I'm sorry, I may have skipped this one screen. There was an option in here as well of where you want to choose the files to back up to. By default, it's going into that same folder, but I could choose this to go into a different drive or directory altogether. Okay, and so now we're going to have automated backups rolling on a regular basis. The next task that I mentioned was database maintenance. And I'll show you again, starting from the way to do that manually, before I show you what it does when we run it automatically. So if you go back to what I said a few minutes ago about ACT data being stored in SQL, in tables and rows, I often help people visualize it by thinking of a big Excel spreadsheet where all of your contact information is, the different fields are columns, and every new record is a new row going across. And as you delete and edit and create new contacts and synchronize them, the database will get fragmented over time. And so database check and repair is a way to re-index the database. It recompresses the file size down and restructures everything to help keep it a little faster and more efficient. If you have never done the database re-indexing and repair, you know, I've done it on some computers that haven't done it in years, and it will reduce the database size by almost 50%. So you can really get good size and speed savings there. It improves the rate at which your database opens and how fast you can move through it. To run it, you can go to Tools, Database Maintenance, Check and Repair. It's right there. We run this menu and it asks which repair operations do you want to do. I always leave them both checked. We'll do an integrity check, which checks your database for errors and repairs any that are found, and a reindex, which is reorganizing all of the tables and rows so that there's no fragmented spaces in there. We'll say OK. And this can be run by anybody that's an ACT administrator. It doesn't have to be done from the server. You can run this. And there is no hard and fast rule for how often this needs to be done. I think weekly is a very good interval. You know, if I were to run another check and repair a second later, it's obviously not going to give me it's going to give me almost zero improvements. So you don't necessarily, it's not something that needs to be run every night. But we'll go ahead and schedule a task. So I did my check and repair, and that helped keep my database maintained. So the ACT scheduler, again, Tools and ACT scheduler here, I can create a task. I choose a database file, give this my login information for the ACT demo. This is what task do I want to run. If you're very eagle-eyed, you might notice database maintenance or database backup is no longer an option here because ACT scheduler is already running a backup task on this database. But we go ahead and we choose database maintenance. It asks, again, just like the last step, which repair and operations do we want to do, and we'll keep them both on. And we'll say run this one weekly. Let's do it every Saturday. Every Saturday at 5 a.m. Generally a time that nobody's in the office. It doesn't matter if anybody is really. The database can lock up during some of the check and repair operations, especially if it does find some type of error that it wants to repair, then it might lock the database. It's just best to do this outside of company hours. Press next. Again, we can type in an optional email address and finish up. And there we go. There is no limit to the number of, you can keep running if you have multiple databases on your computer. You can have every one of them backing up and getting maintained independently and separately. The computer does need to be on in order for the backup operation to happen, which is why it's best done from the server, because servers don't power down generally. There will not be any conflict if you do have multiple computers at the company running these ACT scheduler operations. I guess it wouldn't really hurt to have it in multiple places, but it is a little bit excessive, I suppose. A third thing to point out that this ACT scheduler can do that you might see in my list here is that if the database, when I go to create a task, if the database that I choose out of the list happens to be a remote database, for those of you that are on laptops that synchronize remotely, then you can actually choose database sync as an option to regularly and automatically do a synchronize now. That can certainly be helpful. I like it running on my computer. Sometimes it doesn't. It's up to you how often you want it to run. Some people get annoyed if they're in the middle of doing something else and those synchronized bars come up and interrupt them, but some people like it. Personal preference. That's about all I have for you today. I will open the floor for any questions, and if you want me to check out your Axe scheduler at all to make sure that your database backups are automatically running, I'd be glad to help you do that. And on that note, I actually have an interesting new utility that I want to help announce. I'll take this opportunity to do it. I have a new utility called Calendly, and I'll send you this email. It's in my email signature. But if you go to calendly.com/sbolden, you can actually schedule times right on my calendar that I'm available already, so that we don't have to do any type of phone tag of what time works for you. You can say, give me a 15-minute phone call, and it will tell you time blocks on a particular day that I'm open and available for that. So go ahead and check that out if you'd like to get yourself on my calendar. Any other questions before I let you go for the day? All right, well, thank you again for joining me. I appreciate it, and yeah, absolutely, Ray. Just hang out on the line. Have a great day, everybody, and goodbye now.
Thank you.